Imagine, just for a second, that you are waking up.
Okay.
It's exactly 3:04 a.m. You're in your apartment, right? And you're totally alone.
Oh, the absolute worst time to wake up.
Totally. The witching hour.
Yeah.
So your bed is warm, the room is just pitch black, and you are like 10 stories above the ground.
Right.
Outside, the city is completely silent. There's no traffic humming in the distance.
Yo.
No neighbors murmuring through the drywall. There's just, the heavy blanket of those early morning hours and the absolute stillness of your bedroom.
Setting the scene. I like it.
And then cutting right through that absolute silence, you hear it.
Oh, man.
A sound that just makes your eyes snap open in the dark. A slow, deliberate tap.
Yeah, no thank you.
And it's coming directly from your bedroom window. A window that has no balcony, no fire escape, no ledge, just a sheer vertical drop of 10 stories down to the concrete.
I literally got chills just hearing you set that up. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, you're completely isolated, right? Your brain is telling you that you are safe from, like, gravity itself, and then tap. It's just brilliant. It's this incredibly visceral invasion of what is supposed to be an impenetrable sanctuary.
Exactly. And today, we're taking a deep dive into this incredible source material we uncovered. It's from the YouTube channel, The Midnight Curator, and it's chillingly titled, I Opened My Closet and Something Wearing My Face Came Out.
Such a good title.
Wow, right. Our mission today is to completely deconstruct this supernatural horror narrative because, honestly, it's a masterclass in psychological tension.
It really is.
We're going to unpack how the story takes a single, physically impossible sound, a knock on a high-altitude window, and just twists it.
Yeah, it morphs into this profound, deeply unsettling exploration of identity theft, basically.
Yes, the whole doppelganger concept.
Yeah.
We're going to see how it executes that classic psychological thriller trope, where the boundary between the observer and the monster completely irreversibly dissolves.
It's a phenomenal narrative to analyze. And, what makes this story work so effectively right from the jump is how aggressively it strips away all external variables.
Right, like the isolation we talked about.
Exactly. The author isolates the subject completely. There's no one else to call out to, no ambient noise to distract you or provide comfort.
Just dead silence.
It's just the protagonist, the enclosed space of the bedroom, and this impossible sound. By removing the rest of the world, we're forced into this state of intense, claustrophobic hyperfocus.
And if you're listening to this right now, maybe you're in your car, or maybe you're actually lying in bed looking up at your own ceiling, we're custom tailoring this deep dive for you.
Hopefully not at 3:04 a.m.
Oh yeah, hopefully not.
Yeah.
But whether you want to understand the mechanics of how suspense is built, or you're fascinated by the psychology of fear, or you just love a genuinely terrifying scenario, we are going to break this down step by agonizing step.
We're going to reverse engineer the dread.
I love that phrase.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see the actual gears turning beneath the surface of the fear.
We really need to start with the physical layout of this apartment because the geography of this isolation is, well, it's the whole reason the scene works so well.
Right.
The setting is incredibly specific. Like you said, it's 3:04 a.m. The protagonist wakes up from a deep sleep, and the sound is described as this soft, dull tapping.
But the rhythm is the crucial part.
Exactly. It's slow, it's irregular. Tap, pause, tap, tap.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the rhythm of that sound is where the horror actually begins. It's not just noise, it's communication.
Right?
If, like, a branch hits a window, it's chaotic.
Yeah, or if hail hits a glass pane, it's just a scattershot of sound.
Exactly. But tap, pause, tap, tap, I mean, that requires intent.
Right, it implies a conscious agent.
Yeah.
And we need to talk about what's physically happening to the protagonist's brain at 3:04 a.m.
Oh, the sleep stuff.
Yeah, because when you wake up in the middle of the night like that, you are experiencing something called sleep inertia. Your prefrontal cortex, which is, the logical, rational, problem-solving part of your brain, is still essentially offline.
It's still asleep, basically.
Exactly.
Huh.
But your amygdala, the primitive fear center, that is wide awake.
Oh, wow.
So you're perceiving this highly intentional rhythm with a brain that is biologically primed for panic and poorly equipped for logic.
That is a terrifying combination.
It really is. So the protagonist immediately begins the process of spatial mapping that, well, we all do when we wake up to a strange noise.
Right, like, where does that come from?
Exactly. They lie there, staring at the ceiling, trying to locate the source in a 3D space. They confirm the baseline environment. Completely quiet, no traffic, no neighbors, and then the sound happens again. Tap.
And they locate it.
Yes, it's the bedroom window.
And this is exactly where the impossible threat is introduced. The narrative says the protagonist actually feels a cold sweat slide down their spine.
Because of the context.
Right, because of the architectural reality we just established.
Right.
They live on the 10th floor.
Right.
The author puts you right there in that realization. There is nothing outside that window except open air and the street far below.
No balcony.
No fire escape, no ledge. Just a flat concrete wall and a 100-foot drop to the ground.
It's completely geographically impossible. What's happening here is a severe case of cognitive dissonance.
Okay, break that down for us.
So the brain is presented with two conflicting pieces of data that cannot both be true. Right.
Okay.
Data point A. There's a deliberate knock coming from the outside of my window. Data point B. My window is suspended 10 stories in the air with 0 access points.
Right, so they contradict each other.
Exactly. These two facts cannot coexist in our accepted understanding of physics and reality.
It's exactly like, okay, imagine walking into your house, looking up, and finding muddy footprints on a freshly painted ceiling.
Oh, that's a great analogy. Yeah.
Your brain violently rejects the information because the physics simply don't allow it. You can't have muddy footprints on a ceiling, just like you can't have a person knocking on a 10th floor window.
Yeah. Right. Your mind actually kind of short circuits.
It scrambles to find a rational bridge between those two incompatible realities, no matter how ridiculous that bridge might be.
And that scrambling, that desperate need for a safety narrative, is beautifully detailed in the protagonist's reaction in the story.
They try to rationalize it immediately.
Oh, instantly. They turn their head toward the window. The curtains are closed, but, faint moonlight is leaking through the fabric. The tapping comes again. Tap, tap.
And the text explicitly says it sounded exactly like someone gently knocking on glass.
Yes. But the protagonist's first thought, a bird.
A bird.
They literally tell themselves that maybe a bird flew into the window.
Which is such a deeply human, almost pathetic response when you think about it.
It really is.
I mean, we will grasp at the absolute most unlikely natural explanation just to avoid facing an impossible supernatural one.
Because the alternative is just too terrifying to process.
Right. But even the protagonist realizes the flaw in this logic almost immediately.
Because the prefrontal cortex is finally booting up.
Right.
The protagonist internally debunks their own rationalization. What's fascinating here is how the author handles the logic. Birds don't knock. Birds hit glass in a panic.
Yeah, they thud. Or they break their necks.
Exactly. They don't tap slowly like someone politely asking to be let in. That's an incredibly astute observation about pattern recognition. The pacing of the sound design here is doing so much heavy lifting.
Because it isn't an impact.
Right. It's a request.
Oof. So the protagonist sits up in bed, and immediately the knocking stops.
Which is almost worse.
It is. There are several seconds of complete suffocating silence.
Mm-hmm.
And then a much louder tap.
Yeah.
And it comes from the exact center of the window, like someone had deliberately struck the glass to say, I know you're awake.
The location of the sound shifts from a general at the window to the exact center. It demands your full attention. And here's where we get into the physical barriers that heighten the tension immensely. The curtain. The protagonist grabs their phone, turns on the flashlight, and points it at the window. But the beam only hits the closed curtains.
I love this moment in the narrative. The curtains become this massive tension-building wall.
Yeah.
The flashlight beam hitting that opaque fabric is such a vivid image.
That's a great visual.
It really is. It creates a literal and figurative barrier to the truth. Like the light can't penetrate the fabric, just like the protagonist's logic can't penetrate the mystery of the sound.
They're literally kept in the dark, even with a light in their hand.
Yeah. And the pacing drags out this moment of hesitation agonizingly. They debate, ignoring it, just pulling the covers up and going back to sleep.
Which is what I would do.
Same. But human curiosity, that drive to resolve the cognitive dissonance we talked about, it pushes them out of bed.
Right. They feel the freezing cold floor under their bare feet. The tapping stops again as they approach. And the author describes how the silence suddenly feels heavy, uncomfortable.
Yes, a heavy silence. It isn't a peaceful silence anymore.
No, not at all.
It's a pregnant silence. It's the silence of two entities completely aware of each other, separated only by a few millimeters of glass and a sheet of fabric.
The protagonist stops about 2 feet from the curtains. Their hand hovers in the air.
The hovering hand.
That hovering hand is the physical manifestation of psychological dread. Part of their brain knows that whatever is behind that curtain violates the rules of the natural world.
Right.
They know instinctually that pulling back that fabric is crossing a threshold. They explicitly think to themselves that something feels very, very wrong because no one should be able to reach that window.
But the rationalizing brain kicks in again. Even with their hands shaking in the air, terrified, they're building a safety net of logic.
Oh yeah, they start listing possibilities.
Maybe someone is rappelling from the roof, maybe it's late-night maintenance workers on a rig, maybe a branch got caught in a bizarre updraft.
Highly unlikely.
Totally.
Huh.
They are desperately building a raft of logic right before they jump into the ocean.
And then they do it. They grab the edge of the curtain and rip it aside. Moonlight pours in. The window is clearly revealed.
And there's nothing there.
Nothing.
Just the empty night sky and the faint, glowing lights of the city below. The protagonist literally sags in relief.
They tell themselves they imagine the whole thing, or maybe the high-rise building just swayed in the wind and the window frame settled, making a weird popping noise.
Which buildings actually do.
They do. So they let the curtain fall closed. They turn around to go back to the warmth of their bed.
It's the classic false release of tension.
Exactly. The narrative lets the protagonist and you as the listener exhale. The threat is seemingly neutralized.
The impossible has been debunked as a trick of sleep inertia or architectural settling.
Right, and in horror mechanics, this is a necessary beat of calm. You have to let the rubber band go slack so that when you snap it again, it hits with maximum impact.
And man, does it snap immediately. Because just as they turn their back to the window, the knocking comes again. Tap, tap.
But here is the devastating pivot.
Yeah. The knocking doesn't come from the outside anymore.
No.
It comes from the inside of the glass, right behind the closed curtain.
This is a phenomenal shift in spatial horror. The barrier has been breached, or at least the perception of the barrier has radically changed.
Because they just looked.
Exactly. Think about the adrenaline spike here. The protagonist just looked outside. They verified with their own eyes that the exterior was empty.
Right.
But the sound is now definitively located in the tiny sliver of space between the curtain and the interior pane of glass.
So slowly, very slowly, they pull the curtain aside a second time. And at first glance, the window looks completely normal.
But then they focus on the glass itself.
There are two faint handprints pressed against the outside of the window.
Yeah.
And the author makes sure to note they are fresh.
They're slightly oily, like someone had just placed their bare hands there.
10 floors above the ground.
The visual evidence of the impossible is now undeniable. Those rationalizations, the birds, the settling buildings, the sleep-addled imagination.
They're gone.
Completely shattered by physical residual evidence. 2 human handprints.
The protagonist's chest tightens because they know for an absolute objective fact those prints were not there 10 seconds ago.
And then the auditory assault escalates. It isn't a tap anymore. The narrative describes a long, slow scrape.
Oh, I ate this part.
Like fingernails dragging across the exterior glass. Screech! And then, perhaps the most terrifying detail yet, a voice whispers softly from the other side of the window, right next to the protagonist's ear.
The protagonist explicitly notes, a voice I could somehow hear through the glass. It said, "You saw me."
You saw me.
Wait, stop right there. I have a huge problem with the physics of this scene, and I think it's exactly what makes it so terrifying.
Okay, let's hear it.
We were talking about thick, heavy, 10th floor high-rise window glass.
Right?
This stuff is double paned, often with argon gas between the layers. It's designed to deaden 80 decibel city traffic and withstand hurricane-force winds.
Yes, it's serious glass.
You cannot hear a soft human whisper through that kind of glass. It is an acoustic impossibility.
I completely agree. And that acoustic impossibility is exactly why this moment elevates the story from a thriller to supernatural horror.
Okay, right.
The entity on the outside isn't just violating physical space by hovering 10 stories in the air. It's violating the physical properties of the material separating them.
The glass itself.
Exactly. The glass is supposed to be a protective, sound-dampening barrier. But this entity bypasses those laws of physics.
It just ignores them.
If a 20 decibel whisper transmits perfectly through double-paned glass, it implies the entity isn't using normal acoustic sound waves.
Oh, that is creepy. What is it using?
Well, it suggests the sound is either vibrating the glass itself like a speaker cone, or even worse, it's projecting the voice directly into the protagonist's mind.
Oh my God.
It's a complete violation of the senses.
Okay, so the protagonist steps back so quickly they practically fall over their own bed. Their eyes are locked on the glass. The pale handprints are clearly visible, pressed flat against the outside. Their breathing becomes shallow and ragged. They reiterate the impossible geometry to themselves again. There is absolutely no way someone could be standing out there.
Just empty air.
And then we get this agonizing moment of stillness.
Yes. For a few seconds, nothing moves. The handprints stay perfectly stationary.
Which is almost worse than them moving.
It allows the visual horror to really sink its teeth into the protagonist's brain. But then, the static image becomes dynamic.
Right.
One of the prints slowly slides downward just a fraction of an inch, leaving a little smudge. Exactly, like the hand behind it just shifted its body weight.
And this is where I am screaming at the story.
You know exactly what you're going to say.
Why on earth does the protagonist lean closer to the window when the handprints start sliding? Every single evolutionary survival instinct in the human body is screaming to run out of that apartment, down the hall, into the elevator, and out to the street. If I see a handprint 10 stories up, I am sprinting. Why on earth are they leaning in?
It's infuriating as a reader, but it's actually deeply psychologically accurate.
Really?
It's the concept of morbid magnetism combined with visual confirmation bias.
Okay.
When confronted with a reality-breaking event, there's this primal, almost obsessive need to gather more visual data. The brain is screaming, "This cannot be," so the eyes move closer to either confirm the impossible or find the trick.
Oh, like looking for wires in a magic trick.
Exactly. It's the same reason people rubberneck at a horrific car crash. You can't look away from the violation of the norm. The protagonist is trying to peer into the darkness outside to find the strings, to find the rational explanation.
Because if they find it, they're safe.
Right. And the author gives us a great visual contrast here. The city lights below only illuminate the lower half of the high-rise.
Okay.
Everything above that, where the protagonist is swallowed in pitch black. So they are leaning into the void, trying to see the monster.
Well, the monster proves it isn't just a static trick of the light. The second handprint moves, dragging slowly across the glass, leaving those faint, oily streaks behind.
Which proves an active, continuous physical presence.
Right. The entity is literally holding onto the glass. And then the glass fogs up.
The fogged glass is such an incredibly intimate, invasive detail.
Why is that?
Because it implies proximity and, more importantly, breath.
Ah, yes.
A circle of condensation appears right in the center of the window. Someone or something has placed its mouth against the freezing outside glass and exhaled.
You can practically feel the protagonist's chest tightening here, because the logic is inescapable.
It really is.
If something is exhaling warm breath against the glass, a physical body has to be standing there in the empty air.
Yep.
And then comes another slow scraping noise. Fingers sliding across the smooth surface, and a single word appears in the condensation.
Written backwards from the outside.
Written slowly by a finger from the outside, dragging backward across the glass so it reads correctly on the inside. And the word is open.
Open. The communication evolves from implication to direct command. It isn't just tapping or dragging anymore, it's written language.
Right.
The protagonist stares at the word, their mind totally short-circuiting. And then the soft whisper comes again, somehow perfectly penetrating that thick glass. "Let me in."
The protagonist's hands are visibly shaking at this point. And here's a deeply unsettling detail that the author slips in. The voice sounded strangely familiar.
Ah, yes.
Not exactly like the protagonist's own voice, but close enough to make the hair on their arms stand up. It's the very first hint of the doppelganger theme.
It is the beginning of the identity theft motif. It's the auditory equivalent of the uncanny valley.
The uncanny valley.
Yeah, we'll dive deeper into that concept in a minute, but essentially, the voice is close enough to familiar to trigger recognition, but just off enough to be repulsive and terrifying. Your brain says, "I know that voice, but that voice is wrong."
So the protagonist slowly shakes their head and whispers out loud, "No."
And the entity responds instantly.
The handprints suddenly flatten and widen against the glass, as if pressing much harder in frustration or anticipation.
We're seeing the entity react in real time to the protagonist's defiance. But here's where the narrative completely shifts the rules of engagement.
How so?
Up until this exact second, the threat has been entirely external. It's been kept at bay by the physical barrier of the lock window.
Right, that pane of glass and the little metal latch are the only things keeping the protagonist safe from whatever the hell is hovering 10 stories up in the night sky.
Exactly, but then the window handle slowly starts to move.
Oh, man.
Just slightly. A sharp metallic click echoes in the quiet bedroom.
The protagonist's heart just drops into their stomach because they're standing 2 feet away. They haven't touched the handle, and it just unlocked itself from the outside.
The barrier is failing, and what the entity is demonstrating here is profoundly terrifying. Physical locks and thick glass aren't actual impediments to it.
They're not.
No. They are merely psychological comforts for the protagonist, and the entity is now choosing to playfully dismantle those comforts.
Like taking away a security blanket.
Exactly. It could have entered at any time. It's playing a game.
So the protagonist looks back at the glass. The original fog has faded, but a new message is being written by that invisible finger.
It's longer, much more deliberate.
The cursive words form slowly in the condensation. You already let me in once.
This sentence changes the entire trajectory of the horror.
Totally.
Up until now, we've been experiencing a story about an external siege, an impossible entity trying to break into a fortress. But this sentence, you already let me in once, is a massive paradigm shift.
It's huge.
It implies a past mistake, a prior vulnerability, and most importantly, it suggests that the true threat is no longer outside the glass.
The protagonist's throat goes completely dry because the message isn't finished. A second line appears underneath it in the fog. Look behind you.
This brings up an incredibly important psychological concept, misdirection.
Like a magic trick.
Exactly like a magic trick. Think about a magician performing a sleight of hand. The entire sequence at the window, the rhythmic tapping, the sliding handprints, the fogged breath, the magically unlocking handle,
Yeah.
all of it was designed to command 100% of the protagonist's sensory attention. The window is the waving hand holding the shiny coin.
Oh, wow.
But in any psychological thriller, an obsession with the obvious frontal threat is usually a fatal mistake.
Because they're sneaking up on you.
Right. The entity has been performing a magic trick, or you could look at it like a military flanking maneuver. It used the window as a diversion to blind the protagonist to the stealth infiltration happening behind their back.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I love that magician analogy. So the protagonist reads the words, look behind you, and for several agonizing seconds, they're completely paralyzed. They don't turn around.
They can't.
Their eyes remain glued to the glass. The two pale handprints are still there, perfectly still, just waiting. The room is so deathly quiet they can actually hear the slow, heavy thudding of their own heartbeat.
It's the absolute apex of the tension at the window. The protagonist is trapped. They are caught between the visual, impossible horror right in front of their face and the implied, unseen horror waiting behind their back.
Then, the window handle moves again. Another small, crisp click.
The lock is open.
The heavy window swings open just a fraction of an inch. A thin line of freezing cold night air slips into the room.
Yes.
The curtain begins to sway gently. The physical, hermetic seal of the apartment has been officially broken.
The introduction of the cold night wind is such a brilliant sensory detail by the author.
It makes it real.
It really does. It grounds the supernatural in physical reality. It makes the threat tangible. It isn't just a spooky sound or a creepy image anymore. It's a physical temperature drop in the room. You can feel the cold air on your skin.
The protagonist steps back instinctively, their mind racing. And the narrative lays out the protagonist's terrifying realization explicitly here.
Let's hear it.
They think, there's something outside my window, something that can touch the glass, something that can unlock the latch. But the message says, you already let me in once. That means the thing outside might not be the real danger.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a masterful spatial pivot.
A spatial pivot.
Yeah, the author is transitioning the source of the horror. We're moving from the vast, open, agoraphobic void of the night sky outside the window
Right.
directly into the confined claustrophobic space of the bedroom itself. The threat has bypassed the physical perimeter entirely. It's no longer trying to breach the safe room. It's already inside the safe room with you.
So, slowly, very slowly, the protagonist turns their head over their shoulder toward the bedroom. They scan the room, the unmade bed, the wooden desk, the closet door.
Yeah.
At first glance, everything looks perfectly normal. Nothing has moved. They even have this brief, fleeting moment where they feel incredibly stupid for being scared.
Ah, right.
Wondering if this is some elaborate prank or if they're just having a vivid waking nightmare.
That's the brain's final, desperate attempt at rationalization. It's the last gasp of logic before undeniable proof utterly destroys it.
Because then, they notice it. The closet door is slightly open.
Just slightly.
Just a few inches. A crack of black space. The protagonist is absolutely 100% sure it had been tightly closed when they went to sleep.
Of course.
And the description of the closet here is so evocative. You feel the dread. The author writes that the darkness inside the closet looked thicker than the rest of the room.
Thicker.
Almost like it was actively swallowing the ambient light from the phone's flashlight.
The closet is such a potent symbol in horror because it represents the ultimate domestic unknown.
Right, the monster in the closet.
Exactly. Psychologically, it taps into our earliest childhood fears. It's a space specifically designed to be closed off to hold things in the dark.
Yeah.
The fact that the darkness seems thicker, that it behaves like a black hole swallowing light, signifies that the closet has ceased to be a normal architectural feature of the apartment. It's become a void, a portal.
The protagonist stares at that slightly open closet door for several seconds, just waiting for something to rush out.
But it doesn't.
Nothing happens. Then the spatial grab springs fully shut. Behind them, the curtain shifts again. The window slowly opens a little wider.
The cold air again.
More of that freezing wind enters the room. And a faint whisper drifts in with the breeze. Turn around.
Notice the spatial manipulation happening here. The entity is ping-ponging the protagonist's attention. The voice comes from the window behind them, commanding them to turn back to the external threat.
The protagonist notes that the voice sounded like it was standing right over their shoulder. But when they spin around to face the window,
It's empty.
it's totally empty. Just the black, vast expanse of the night, 10 floors up above the street. The pale handprints are completely gone. The condensation is gone, like nothing had ever been there at all.
This is the completion of the misdirection. The entity used the window to command attention, forced the protagonist to look at the closet to plant the seed of internal dread, and then called them back to the window just to reveal that the external threat has vanished.
It's psychological torture.
It is.
The protagonist's chest seizes up. The logic is terrifying. If the thing outside isn't outside anymore, where did it go?
And the environment answers that question immediately through acoustic mirroring.
Yes. A quiet sound comes from across the room, from the closet. A slow, soft tap.
Oh, brilliant.
The protagonist freezes in their tracks. The sound comes again. Tap. And the protagonist realizes with absolute horror that it sounds exactly like the knocking on the glass from earlier, just muffled by wood.
It's a brilliant audio cue. The exact same rhythm, the exact same deliberate intent, but transposed from the glass of the window to the wood of the closet door.
Wow.
It's how our brain maps sound in a 3D space. The entity has perfectly mirrored its behavior in a new location, confirming beyond a shadow of a doubt that the thing that was outside is now inside.
The protagonist's legs feel like lead. They step closer to the closet. Every single step makes the hardwood floor creak, which just amplifies the unbearable tension in this silent room.
Truly.
And as they get within a few feet, the closet door moves slightly on its own, swinging open another inch.
And here we get a brand new sensory detail added to the mix. Smell.
The smell.
The protagonist detects a cold smell drifting out from the crack in the closet door. It's described as damp, old, like something that had been sitting undisturbed in complete darkness for a very long time.
It's the smell of stagnation, like an underground cellar or a subterranean cave, which contrasts so sharply with that fresh, freezing night air blowing in from the window behind them.
Look at the physical position of the protagonist right now.
Okay.
They are literally trapped between two open voids. The open window behind them, bleeding the freezing chaos of the outside world into the room, and the opening closet in front of them, bleeding this damp, ancient darkness into the room.
They are the meat in a supernatural sandwich.
That is exactly what they are. Yes.
And then the chaos totally erupts. Behind them, the window suddenly slams wide open. The wind violently rushes into the room, roaring in their ears, whipping the heavy curtain upward so it flaps wildly.
The storm begins.
And the whisper comes again, much louder this time, right behind their ear.
You shouldn't have looked outside.
The entity is actually punishing the protagonist for their curiosity. It's mocking them for their initial engagement with the window anomaly. The protagonist's heart nearly stops, because at that exact second, amidst all the roaring wind, something inside the closet moves.
Finally.
The wooden door creaks slowly, opening a few more inches. They can hear a soft, heavy shifting sound inside, like someone adjusting their body weight in the darkness.
The physical presence of the entity is now undeniably inside the room. The detail of the shifting weight grounds the supernatural threat in heavy physical reality.
It's not just a shadow.
No, it isn't a ghost. It has mass.
So the protagonist's hand is still resting on the closet knob, but suddenly they want nothing to do with opening it. They're experiencing massive sensory overload.
Explain that.
Well, behind them, the window is fully open, the wind is howling, the curtain is violently whipping around like a flag in a hurricane.
Right.
But here's the incredibly eerie detail.
Mm-mm.
Somehow, the rest of the apartment, the space right around the closet, is completely silent.
Oh, wow.
The protagonist notes it's too silent.
What we're talking about here is sensory gating, or rather, the breakdown of it. The author has created a localized storm.
Localized to the window.
Yes. The chaos is contained entirely in the cubic space around the window, while the interior of the room remains unnaturally deadened. It creates this surreal, dreamlike atmosphere where the normal laws of physics and acoustics are completely breaking down.
Right.
Your brain can't process a roaring wind that doesn't make a sound 2 feet away.
In the middle of this bizarre, contradictory sensory environment, the whisper comes again, closer than ever, hissing right beside their ear. Open it.
And this is where the protagonist realizes the true horror of the spatial shift.
Yeah. The voice isn't coming from the roaring window anymore. It sounds like it's coming from inside the room, from directly behind them, as they face the closet.
Okay, so what do?
Slowly, dreading what they might see, they turn around to look at the window one last time. It's completely empty. No handprints, no fog. Just the dark night sky howling into the room.
Nothing.
But the whisper continues.
You wanted to see.
And the protagonist realizes why the voice sounded familiar earlier.
The doppelganger element.
Yes, it sounds almost exactly like their own voice.
The mimicry is calibrating. The entity is adjusting its vocal cords to match the protagonist's resonance and pitch perfectly.
They turn back toward the closet. The door is swung wider now, wide enough to see inside. But the darkness inside looks wrong. It's too deep, too opaque, like it isn't just an absence of light, but a physical substance hiding something.
And then
They see movement.
this is the moment of emergence. The narrative has meticulously built the tension, layer by agonizing layer, and now it finally delivers the physical manifestation of the threat.
Two incredibly pale shapes slowly emerge from the pitch black shadows of the closet. Hands.
Okay.
They grip the inside edge of the wooden door. The protagonist describes them vividly. Long fingers, thin, but otherwise almost identical to their own hands.
Oh, that's deeply upsetting.
Right. The hands pull the door open completely, and a figure steps out of the darkness and into the dim light of the bedroom.
The cognitive dissonance hits its absolute peak here. The protagonist's brain simply refuses to understand the visual data it's receiving.
Because the thing standing right in front of them looks exactly like them.
Exact replica.
Same height, same build, wearing the exact same clothes, possessing the exact same face. It's a perfect doppelganger, but the author is so careful to describe the subtle wrongnesses that make it utterly horrifying.
Yes, let's dive massive into the uncanny valley effect here, because it's the core of why this monster is so scary.
I've heard of that, but break it down for us.
Sure, so the uncanny valley is a concept coined by robotics professor Masahiro Mori. The idea is that as a robot or an animation becomes more human-like, our empathy and affinity for it increases up to a point.
Right, up to a point.
But right before it becomes perfectly human, there's a sharp drop in our affinity. It plunges into the valley. Our reaction goes from, oh, that's cute, to that is deeply repulsive and horrifying.
Like with really bad CGI in movies.
Exactly. Now, evolutionary biologists theorize that this response is a hardwired survival mechanism. Why are we terrified of something that looks 99% human but not 100%?
Because it might be sick.
Yes. One theory is pathogen avoidance. It looks like a human who is severely diseased or deceased, triggering a biological imperative to get away so we don't catch the sickness.
Oh, that makes sense.
Another theory is evolutionary competition. Maybe our early ancestors encountered other hominid species, like Neanderthals, who looked almost exactly like us but were competitors or predators. Whatever the origin, when we see something in the uncanny valley, our brain screams, imposter, threat, run!
Wow. And the author captures this perfectly. It's an exact replica, but the biological nuances are missing. The skin is described as too pale and stretched, giving the impression of a latex mask pulled too tight over a bone frame.
That's a gruesome description.
The eyes are too dark, too empty, completely lacking the micro-expressions and spark of actual human consciousness. Dead eyes. And the smile is far too wide. It's a grotesque, muscular exaggeration of a human expression that no real face could make.
It's a monstrous caricature of the protagonist.
It is. The thing tilts its head slowly, just watching them, studying them like a bug on a pin, and then it speaks.
Using their voice.
And it uses the protagonist's voice perfectly. It isn't an echo, it isn't a close approximation, it is a flawless acoustic replication. It looks right at them and says, "Thank you for opening the window."
Oh, wow.
Thank you for opening the window.
The thematic weight of that single line is absolutely staggering. Thank you for opening the window. It's the vampire trope of the invitation.
Yes, they have to be invited in.
It confirms that the entire sequence, the tapping, the handprints, the fog, none of it was a brute force attack.
No.
It was a convoluted psychological ritual designed to make the protagonist willingly break the seal of their own sanctuary. The entity didn't break in, it tricked the protagonist into consenting to its entry.
Because they pulled the curtain, they opened the latch.
Exactly. It needed the invitation, even if that invitation was just cracking the window a fraction of an inch to look outside. The monster manipulated human curiosity to gain access.
The protagonist's legs finally give out a bit. They feel incredibly weak. They back up a step and whisper, "Who? What are you?"
It doesn't answer, does it?
The creature doesn't answer. Its response is just to stretch that impossible smile even wider. It glances over the protagonist's shoulder toward the open window where the cold air is still rushing in, and then it takes a slow step closer to the protagonist.
The movement is described as slow and casual, like it had all the time in the world.
Yeah.
There's no urgency to the monster. It doesn't lunge. It doesn't attack. It has already won. The spatial trap is already closed.
Yeah, there's nowhere to go.
The absolute unhurried confidence of the doppelganger is far more terrifying than if it had acted like a feral beast. It's the leisurely stroll of an apex predator that knows its prey is hopelessly cornered.
The creature leans in, closing the distance, puts its face right next to the protagonist's ear, and whispers a final devastating sentence in their own voice. It says, "You're the one outside now."
You're the one outside now.
Yeah.
That sentence is the fulcrum upon which the entire reality of the narrative flips upside down.
What do you mean by that?
You're the one outside now.
It's a statement of complete literal displacement. The boundary hasn't just been crossed, it's been inverted.
Before the protagonist can even process the horror of that sentence, before they can even react, the lights in the apartment suddenly snap out. Everything plunges into pitch black.
Absolute sensory deprivation.
For just a fleeting moment. And then, abruptly, the overhead lights hum back on. And we get this violently jarring return to normalcy.
Everything is fine.
The roaring wind is instantly gone. The closet is completely empty, just shoes and coats. The window is closed, locked tight, and the curtains are perfectly drawn.
It's crazy.
The narrative explicitly states everything was exactly the way it should be. The supernatural storm has completely passed, leaving zero physical trace of the chaos.
Except for one thing. One tiny detail.
Okay.
The protagonist looks down and sees their smartphone lying on the hardwood floor. The screen is glowing. It's currently recording a video.
Ah, it's the final piece of the puzzle, the only remaining artifact of the impossible event.
The protagonist picks up the phone slowly, their hands still trembling, and presses play on the video it just recorded. I honestly gasped when I read this ending.
It's a great twist.
The author writes, "The footage showed my bedroom from earlier, but the camera angle was wrong."
The camera angle is the ultimate horrifying reveal. It provides objective, recorded proof of the displacement that the entity just whispered about.
Because the footage is filming the bedroom from outside the window,
Wow.
10 floors above the ground.
Yes.
And standing there, hovering in the empty, freezing night air, looking directly through the glass into the warm, safe bedroom, is the protagonist,
smiling.
smiling.
It's a stunning piece of philosophical and psychological horror. The narrative has executed a flawless reality warp. The footage shows the bedroom from the exact perspective of the monster outside the window.
Right.
And the person outside the window, the entity that was tapping on the glass, is the protagonist.
So what does this all mean? We have to synthesize this. The Midnight Curator took a simple architectural impossibility, a knock on a 10th floor window, and used it to weave this massive, intricate web of misdirection and psychological torture.
Ultimately, it's a story about the complete dissolution of identity.
Oh, for sure.
Throughout the entire narrative, the protagonist and us as the listener firmly believes they are the objective observer. They believe they are safely inside their apartment, watching a monster try to get in.
Because that's how these stories usually go.
Right. But the final twist reveals that the boundary between observer and monster hasn't just dissolved, it has inverted completely. The protagonist was supplanted the very moment they engaged with the anomaly.
The entity manipulated the protagonist's senses.
Yeah.
Projecting whispers through thick glass, leaving shifting handprints, mimicking their voice, all to force a specific physical action. The opening of the window.
The invitation.
The invitation. And in doing so, the protagonist unknowingly traded places with the entity. The thing standing inside the apartment now, the thing that just picked up the phone, is the monster.
Yes.
And the true protagonist, the real human being, has been banished to the void outside, left to hover 10 stories up in the dark, banging on the glass.
This deep dive really illustrates a profound truth about why the psychological thriller genre is so enduring.
Right.
It reminds us that the scariest monsters aren't the ones violently trying to break our doors down with an axe.
No, those are easy to understand.
The truly terrifying monsters are the ones that use our own psychology against us. They use our curiosity, our morbid magnetism, and our desperate need for logical understanding to trick us. They are the monsters that convince us, step by agonizing step, that we've already let them inside.
It's such a chilling realization. And I want to leave you, if you're still listening in the dark, with one final lingering thought to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive.
Lay it on us.
Think back to that final scene. The phone is lying on the floor of the bedroom, recording the video.
Right.
The video shows the bedroom from the outside, looking in at the smiling entity.
Babe.
But if the footage was captured from outside the 10th floor window hovering in the empty air,
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
who or what was actually holding the camera?
That's the ultimate terror of the unresolved perspective. The perspective doesn't make sense unless there are more of them out there.
Exactly. So the next time you wake up in the dead of night, maybe right around 3:04 a.m., and the house is perfectly silent, and you hear a slow, deliberate tap on the glass,
Maybe it's best to just keep your eyes closed.
pull the covers up.
Pull the covers up. Ignore the cognitive dissonance. Keep the curtain drawn. And whatever you do, do not open the window.
Because you never know what's waiting in the dark to take your place.
Think about that silence. Think about the sheer drop. And remember that sometimes the only barrier between you and the unthinkable is as thin as a pane of glass. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.